If you know anything about Washington, you know that terms like bipartisan are sprinkled onto policies by politicians, pundits, journalists, and the mainstream media in order to make you think that this is the greatest thing that's ever happened. Look at this teamwork. Look at the camaraderie. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. But if you know anything about Washington, you also know to be critical of terms like bipartisan because they are often used in order to cover up neoliberal nonsense or Washington consensus BS. And just last week, of course, we had the perfect example of this with Senate Democrats voting, or actually, excuse me, not yet voting, but sponsoring a bill with Senate Democrats. Senate Democrats sponsoring a bill with Senate Republicans in order to implement an automatic austerity program. This is reporting from Common Dreams by Jake Johnson. A handful of Senate Democrats joined forces with Republicans last week to advance sweeping budget legislation, which would establish an automatic deficit reduction process that could trigger trillions of cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, and food stamps and other social programs. Here's the thing about this bill. So basically, how it works is if there is a projected deficit and or what the deficit is going to be, and if it turns out that it's going to end up the deficit is going to be over that projection, the next year, automatic cuts are going to come into these social safety net programs and the like in order to, and social security is not touched, of course, because people over 65 vote, right? That automatic cuts are going to come into these programs in order to basically make up the difference. And the idea behind it, which Democrats think they are so brilliant for doing, is basically both Republicans and Democrats have taken advantage of, especially Republicans most recently, with with Trump's tax reforms. Basically, what they'll do is be a little bit misleading with the numbers when they're playing around with the projections and the in the bills and yada yada, so that then it ends up basically costing more, and it allows you to sell things off to the people a lot easier. And so the idea that Senate Democrats think they're so brilliant for doing is tying it to social programs so that Republicans will support it, which will make it so that Republicans aren't able to supposedly do sneaky things. But obviously, this is going to hurt Democrats as soon as Democrats get back in power. And here's the more important thing. Why do it to social safety net program? Why do it so that it hurts the least among us the most? Why not do it so that it actually, make it so that there's an automatic tax hike for people in the top 1% or 1/2 of 1% automatically, so that the automatic tax rate bumps up in order to make up the difference. Because I'll tell you what, if you were actually very serious about making it so that the Republicans can't sneak in this kind of stuff, you would tie it to their donors. Because if you tie it to their donors, obviously there would never be any more overestimations with the deficit, because people would be very worried, right? Because as soon as all of a sudden rich people are having to pay more taxes, can't have that. But of course then Republicans wouldn't support it, is the idea. And here's the other thing, though. This is really going to hamstring policies of Bernie Sanders. I mean, I think even Bernie Sanders came out, Senator Bernie Sanders, the ranking member of the Senate Budget Committee, came out last week opposing the legislation, warning that it could be used by Republicans to unilaterally cut programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and nutrition assistance. And here's the thing. If we try to pass something like Medicare for all, you're going to automatically have all kinds of cuts come in, and it's going to hobble the program from the beginning. I mean, this program is so, this bill is such a bad idea. Write your senators and write your congressmen. And the last little bit of detail that I want to bring in here, if this bill had been implemented for the past decade, there would have been $9.5 trillion in cuts. Now, of course, what they're going to respond to you and say is, well, hey, look, if we implement this bill, there wouldn't be those massive amounts of cuts because the projections are going to be a lot more accurate. Come on, you really believe that? There's been numerous studies to show that the will of the bottom 50%, like their interests, are almost never reflected in the policies which gets passed. It's almost exclusively the will of corporations and the top 1%, which actually, like, it's their interest which get turned into legislation. Um, and so, again, if you want to actually have accurate representation, have automatic cuts go in to the top 1%. Now, the thing that I also want to I just want to shout this out because I live in Virginia personally, and my senators are out here doing this. Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, both from Virginia, are out here supporting this nonsense bill. I'm going to be writing to my senators, and I hope that you will too, in order to give them a piece of your mind, tell them that this is absolute nonsense, and tell them, hey, look, if you're actually serious about financial responsibility, talk about taxing the wealthy a lot more.